Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to share with you guys some learning resource about accessibility. Before I jump in, just a quick reminder, I share everything about UX from interviewing tips to portfolio critics on my YouTube channel. So if you are interested on this type of content, please feel free to hit the subscribe so you won't miss any of my future content. A couple of reasons why I want to talk about this topic, which actually I feel personally very interested about for a long time, is actually in my recent mentorship chat, I got to ask a lot about hey, if I'm interested in interviewing with Google or some of those top tech companies, any special tips or recommendations that how can I best prepare for my interviews. And one of the top things on my mind really is accessibility. And this is one of those topics that, to be very honest, I did not have much experience or knowledge before I joined Google. When I was in an interviewing process with Google, this is one of my biggest struggle because I know from what I hear from friends and families, like accessibility is just one of the very highly valued topic for and within Google as an organization. So I was a little bit struggling, like how do I build up my knowledge within this short time frame? And because my past work experience did not really get me like much involvement in this area, like how can I quickly gain some basic knowledge and be able to develop a point of view and have be able to talk about this comfortably like during interviews. So I wanted to share with you some very easy to access free learning resource if you are either interested on this topic or just trying to prepare for your upcoming interviews. Wanted to share some resource where you can quickly learn on your own about some basic for accessibility. Another reason that why I want to talk about it is really this is a topic I think I just personally deeply care about for any designers, and it's a skill you should develop. And as there is the numbers 1 in 7 people live in the world with has some form of disability, so we're looking at really at least 1 billion people in the world. And at the same time, when we think about accessibilities, I really want to encourage you to broaden your mindset. It's really not just limited to permanent severe disability, because there are different type and different categories. There are permanent, there's temporary, there's also situational disabilities actually. Imagine if you're traveling to a foreign country to talking speaking a different language, or holding your baby on one hand and having only one hand to check your phone, or driving in a car that you can't even see or use your phone. Those are all some examples of, I think, everyday life we might all come across once in a while. And also comes to design, there are actually a lot of stuff that designed for people with disabilities actually ends up helping everyone. For example, the flexible straw email and closed caption, which designed for deaf and hearing impaired people, but actually now enjoyed by everyone. With that in mind, and let me just jump right into some of the learning resource that I want to share with you guys. All right, let's take a look. So the first one I want to share is material design. This is a really good place if you want to gain some basic understanding of what is accessibility and what are some dimensions you should think about, and what are some examples that to guide in your design work. So we are on the page. If you just search accessibility, material design, I believe this is the link that will surface out, but I will also share the links in the video descriptions. Here, as you see on the right hand, there's an index. It really started from very basic and simple, easy to understand language to talk about what is accessibility. And why shall we care about it? Accessibility in design allows users of diverse abilities to navigate, understand, and use your design. And what I love about this is it really explained, I think, accessibility, try to dive into different dimensions, from like visual hierarchy to color and contrast to layout, typography to writing, language, and imagery, even sound and motion. So and feel free to navigate and take a look in the information and the educational information provided here. Before it goes into the different dimensions, it actually talks about assistive technology, and what are some common technologies used. For example, screen readers, which is probably one of the most commonly used technology to like help vision impaired users or people who has difficulty reading be able to navigate around the screens, from mobile phones, tablet to desktop, like be able to have this tool, this software program that use Braille to read the text, display or read the text aloud. So like in this area, it has some like I think navigation, more details about screen readers, how it works, and following by that, it goes into hierarchy, which I think is a really important topic. For example, this example really explained it well. Like by placing important actions at the top of the screen, they're usually given more importance in the hierarchy. So this recommended example has the navigation bar and photos, paths, the header of this page at the top before you go into the image, versus the example below, caution, which is not recommended, is to show all the content first and then the navigation to the bottom, which in this case, if you're really using a screen reader, because of the visual hierarchy is positioned this way, you might be creating some really confusing journey for the user, that they have to listen to all the content of the image label first and then like have an option in context of what they're looking at. So this is, I think, really good example to show like what does it mean to like think about, have an angle of hierarchy in designing your experience. Then it goes into some other topics, for example, color and contrast. I think color and contrast, this is probably the most familiar to every designers if you like haven't really got much involvement into accessibility, because I think when you do the everyday design, like we're always having like the opportunity to think about the visual language. And for example, if you're designing for a button that has a text overlay on it, like how to make sure it has enough contrast that people will be able to read it with no problem. So here it provided also some tools that you can use to check color contrast, and also some guidelines. For example, if we're talking about large text, color contrast ratio is recommended at 3:1 against the background. And versus if we're looking at smaller text, a higher contrast is usually at 4.5:1 against the background is usually recommended. So, and then followed by that, there's some like very straightforward visual examples of which cases it worked well versus some other cases it might be creating issues for users. Then it goes into layout, typography, which I'm not gonna talk those one by one, but as I navigate around, you can see the information is organized, very well organized, with some like concrete tangible examples to show, and the actual design examples, how those thoughts of accessibility angles are carried out in the design. At the end, I think this is a very helpful session, the implementing accessibility. It actually has more examples, like for example here, like use native elements such as the standard platform dialog, versus on the right hand there is an example using a non-standard element such as this non-standard platform dialog to perform a standard dialog text. This will require actually extra testing to work well with assistive technology. So, this part, it really talks about how can you like transfer the different angles or dimensions within accessibility into your everyday design work. Like what are some like ways to take and bring those accessibility lens in designing the experience For example, how to label the UI elements and how to help documentation and also testing and research. So, it's just a one page. It has a lot of information, but I don't think it's too overwhelming as it is written in a way that is super easy to understand. Especially, I love those examples. So, definitely highly recommended. I think that's actually one of the resources that I looked at very first when I started to learn about this topic. Okay, the other website I want to share with you guys is this Microsoft inclusive design resource. So inclusive design, yes, it is a different subject, but it also has a lot of overlapping with accessibility. Not gonna go too much into the depths of how they overlap or differentiate from each other, but this is a really helpful resource. I think Microsoft has done a lot of amazing work in this horizon overall, and this website has explained like some guiding principles. For example, exclusion happens when we solve problem using our own bias, and this has shown like some principles from recognize exclusion, so for one, extend to many, and learn from diversity. And more important, which I find really helpful, is the resources here. So you can see that there are a lot of toolkit, like you can download this inclusive one-on-one that is basically a menu explain like the word of inclusive design and talking some of the basics and shift your design thinking towards more of a universal solution. It also has toolkit for inclusive activities. So if you're planning like some workshop or activities with your team, this might be a good place to look at. Then goes into other like some booklet in pursuit of inclusive AI and designing for guidance. So followed by that, it also have like a film. I think there are a couple of other videos here that are some short films talking about, like inclusive design in action and some stories like in real world life, people's life, like how inclusive design can help in really everyday people's life. So I find this is a really nice resource if you're looking for some toolkit or some like just videos to immerse yourself and get to learn from more of everyday people's life view to understand, okay, what does this mean? Not only accessibility but also inclusive. So really good resource and highly recommended. Next one I want to talk about is the iOS human interface guidelines. Within these guidelines, it has actually a section called accessibility. So in this website, it talks about also dives into accessibility from like a pretty holistic angle. Start with intro, best practices, user interaction, to different angles in design, but mostly focus on like iOS system. So like there are some iOS features explained here. If you're an iPhone user, you're probably already familiar with them. But I think this is something probably helpful to get around. If you are interested on like designing for iOS system, and it will be good to know some of the best practices and how it works. For example, here it talks about design with accessibility in mind, support personalization, and then it goes into user interactions. Gestures, how different gestures helps make drag and drop accessible in your iOS app. So overall, I think this is more of, because it's actually part of the iOS developer human interface guidelines, it's really more focused on the iOS system. So especially if you're wanting to get a bit more like details in the technical guidelines or best practices for making accessible designs for iOS system, this might be a good place to look at. The next one I want to share is color.review. So color.review is actually a color picker with like a built-in contrast check. So there are different tools for checking contrast ratio, but this one I just find super handy if you want to just get a quick grab of whether your design can pass the AA or AAA threshold. So you can just use this picker, enter your foreground and background color here, and it will show you where your design falls within. Like right now, this example, contrast between foreground and background is 12, which is it's in a very good state, and that passed the AAA and for text and headline as well. So this is a very handy tool if you just want to check, like do a quick sanity check of your design to make sure whether the color contrast is passing the accessibility recommendations. One other thing I just really want to mention, I think that can really help is for me to understand how accessibility work. This is a big topic, but you can start from one little task or one little angle. For example, just turn the screen reader function on your phone and try it on your favorite app. And see how it works. What might be some struggles you see, and what might be some experience you think that can improve. A shout out to Bingying. So Bingying is a designer who works on the Android team as a UX designer, and she is a absolutely subject matter expert that I looked up to learn about accessibility, and has shared with me so many amazing resources on this topic. It is actually a YouTube playlist. It's a collection of videos that Bingying has created. It's called Designing for Accessibilities. Curated video about inclusive design and understanding people with different types of disabilities. So feel free to check out some videos here. Bingying is an amazing designer who is definitely an expert in this area that I got to learn so much about, and this is a resource. I just feel so grateful that Bingying has created this playlist on YouTube that we can all take a look and learn more about the subject. So at the end, just want to mention, accessibility is a huge topic. By no means I'm an expert on this subject, and I'm still learning for sure at the same time. So the whole purpose I want to do this video is really, number one, if you're preparing for your interviews, this might be something helpful. If you haven't done this much in your actual work or past work, this might be a subject in long term can help you and grow more in the design career as a UX designer to learn about. On the other hand, I just think this is a topic that really matters. It's not just the right thing to do. I think it fundamentally can change and impact so many people. You and me work as a UX designer to actually shape this experience for everyday user. So feel free to share with me if you have any thoughts or questions. Feel free to leave me comments here, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.